Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Art for Engineers. My name is Erin, and I am so happy to have you here with me today. Thank you for joining me. By now, hopefully you've been following along. We've covered a lot of information. We talked about lines, we've talked about gestural drawing, contour drawing. You guys, this is all familiar to you by now. And in our last episode, we talked also about positive and negative space and learning to approach a drawing not necessarily from the most direct, linear way, but sometimes coming in from the side in this more abstract, positive, negative way. Hopefully this is fun for you guys. I'm having a blast teaching you. And of course, if you have any questions along the way, you guys know how to get a hold of me, Instagram and Twitter, all that. But today, we're going to kind of move back towards just lines, but we're going to start putting them together in a really rigorous way. So, rigor is, of course, the opposite of a gestural drawing. Gestural drawing is all about being loose and fast and just getting stuff down on the page as quickly as possible. The more rigorous side of things is something called rectangles and squares exercise. This is really just about refining your lines and constructing an abstract drawing of overlapping rectangles and squares. Now, why do we do this? The reason that we do this is, like I said, in part to work on rigor, and by rigor I mean really working on straight lines, really making sure that your line work is clean, really trying to be intentional with what you're putting on the page. And the other reason we do this is to introduce the thought of line weights. Some of you may be familiar with what I mean by that. Line weights, for those of you who don't know or aren't familiar, is a way that you can create depth in a drawing with simply adjusting the thickness and darkness of the lines that you're using. So it makes sense, right? Things that are closer to you in space appear bigger and they appear more intense, and that's true of your lines as well. So a thicker, darker line implies to the viewer that that object, that line, is closer to you. Same thing, if a thinner, lighter line is on the page, it looks farther away because it literally looks farther away to your eye, right? Your eye does not register it with the same intensity and nearness as it does with a really thick line. So let's show a really quick example right here at the top of the page of what I mean by that. You guys are familiar with the differences in pencil lines? We have a couple here, so I'll just grab an HB, a 2H, and a 2B. So, got my pencils. So the HB line looks a bit like that. The 2H line is here, and the 2B line is here. So those are 3 different line weights, right? And the thicker, darker line looks as though it is closer to you. Obviously, it's not closer. These are all on the same piece of paper. I get it. But what your eye isn't getting is that that's not true. It looks like it's closer. It's magic of drawing. Everyone get excited. Okay, so that's really important when you're drawing more complex drawings than just straight lines. But a great way to work on that and really understand the power of that is, like I said, through this overlapping rectangles and squares exercise. So we're just going to jump in. I've pulled the camera back a bit, so hopefully you can see a lot of what's happening on the page today. And I think I'm just going to get started. So the reason, like I said, behind this drawing is not just rigor and line weights, but it's also creating volumes, something you guys are familiar with from our gestural drawings. And I'm going to start with the object that is closest to me because we're not filling in these rectangles and squares. That'll make sense in a minute. All right, so I'm going to actually jump up and pick a 5B pencil here. So this is going to give me a really nice dark thick line. Just going to give it a nice little sharpening here. And I'm just going to arbitrarily start somewhere in the page. Well, I guess not arbitrary because I'm being intentional about it. I'm going to make a nice big rectangle right here. So I'm taking care as I do this to try and draw these at right angles to one another. And if you don't like how dark one line is, you can go back and make it darker. You can really Make this a nice bold, almost double line. Just double up, just so this really, when we're all done, it really reads like it's closer to you than anything else. I'm like out of the camera up there, sorry guys, but you can see what's happening on my hands. So that's a nice rectangle. Now, just because I want to exaggerate that moving backwards on the page, everything else is farther away, we're going to really emphasize this line weight thing. I'm going to drop down to a 2B. So this is on top. Now, what is it on top of? I think it's just on top of a rectangle that starts about here, comes up this way, and runs into it right there. And then maybe there's another one on that same plane, so right behind this one, but equal to that one with the same pencil weight. Maybe there's another one that's up, starts here. And it's a bit longer. So there, with just a few lines on the page, we've already started building depth, right? Because we've got this object on top, the closest thing to us with the darkest, thickest lines. We've got the two rectangles behind it, and those have slightly lighter, thinner lines, which again implies that they are moving backwards away from us in space. So that's what we're doing. We're building space. We're creating space out of nothing. It's just a plain white piece of paper with a couple pencil lines on it. And already we're giving this impression of depth. And that's a huge tool that you can use in your drawings to really bring them to life. To create depth is to imply multiple dimensions beyond what's just there on the page. So I'm going to continue working on this. I'm probably going to speed it up so you guys don't have to sit here and watch me draw just rectangles and squares for 45 minutes without anything happening. But I really want you to pay attention to exactly what's happening on the page, you know, the differences in line weights, and we'll touch back in together when this drawing is closer to completed. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop there. You guys have a really good idea of what I'm talking about now. You can see how quickly we filled this page with really interesting variations on the same shape. So that's one thing we can take away, right? Rectangles and squares, they're just variations on the same shape. We've also played a bit with composition. The way that we chose to lay these out was not necessarily arbitrary, but what looked pleasing to us. We've also got a lot of depth on the page without using any shadows. This is just line weights. We have the thick, dark, rich lines closest to us, and then things fade away almost to the point where you can't quite see them, but they still manage to hold space on the page and create interest. The last thing, right, is rigor. There's a lot of intention behind every line. There's also a lot of slowing down, trying to make these lines as straight as possible on the first try without the use of a straight edge. And why is that important? If you are using a ruler to make all of your straight lines, A, you're limited to only being able to draw straight lines when you have a ruler or a straight edge available to you. And B, like we talked about in lesson 1, those lines don't necessarily hold a lot of interest. They're almost too perfect, right? A machine-made ruler is great for drafting. It's great for architecture. It's great for certain applications, if you're writing fonts or whatever it is. But if you're freehanding, that's where the real skill comes in, the real nuance, the real interest. And as you watched me do this exercise, hopefully you saw that I did use an eraser a few times. Nothing wrong with using an eraser. If you mess up, totally okay. And it was fun. I mean, you can really fill this out, and you can really intentionally leave empty spaces. That's really interesting. You can build around an empty space. You can cluster certain things together, so you can make a whole bunch of really close objects, dark close objects right in front and right in the middle, and then things can sort of scatter out to the sides. You can play around with the endless variety of ways that this can look, simply using a couple different pencils, a couple different shapes, and that's it. If you don't have a variety of pencils, this is a really great opportunity to work on pressure, right? You can use the same pencil. I'm going to grab my HB pencil here as soon as I can find it. Here's my HB pencil. And you can make an intense different variety of line weights just by how hard you're pressing. So that's the hardest I'm pressing right there. And then here's the same pencil pressing a bit lighter. Here's the same pencil pressing a bit lighter. And so light, it's just skimming across the page. So you don't need a bunch of fancy tools. You don't need a bunch of different pencils. For me, they're helpful, but I also just have, I mean, you should see how many pencils I have. It's a sickness, guys. I've got to stop collecting pencils. But if you want to take this on with my embarrassing secret favorite tool, which is the Papermate mechanical refillable pencil, the same exact exercise can be accomplished quite successfully. So, as always, good luck. I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram, Art of 9 to 5. Also, visit my website, artof9to5.com. Use the hashtags Art of 9 to 5 and Art for Engineers. Let me see what you guys are doing. Let me see your really fun exercises. I encourage you to do these anywhere you get the chance. In the bar napkin, out for drinks with your friends, riding on the subway, grab a sketchbook, or just on the back of an envelope. It doesn't really matter. You can accomplish these same skills and practice these same exercises on any blank piece of whatever you can get your hands on and a number 2 pencil. So have fun. I'm looking forward to next time. I think we'll be moving forward a bit with composition and also perhaps starting to talk about shadows. Not sure yet. So stay tuned, get excited, and I will see you guys soon. All right, have a great day.